What's up, guys? This is my K24A2 swapped 8 gen. Originally came with the 1.8 liter, the R18A1. And to get this to get in here, because you know the SI already comes with the K, so it already fits. But to get it in here, I'm using a K24 post mount on the CRV with knockoff Hasport motor mounts. They're 70A. I'm also using the stock R18 subframe with the R18 rear mount. And to get the rear mount to actually fit, because it doesn't actually bolt up to the oil pan, you have to swap the bushings from the SI mounts to the R18 mount. And then that way it will bolt up to the oil pan. I'm also not using the SI oil pan. I'm using a CSX base oil pan. And basically the only difference that I've noticed between the two are the oil pan on the CSX bolts to the block, but it doesn't bolt to the tranny like on the SI. So to combat that, all I did was I got the dust shield that came off of the CSX base and I bolted it up so no dust would go into the flywheel, and it works fine. And for the pulley system, I'm running no AC, no power steering. I'm gonna try and get some power steering in this soon, but it's the K24 crank pulley, no AC, CSX base idler pulley instead of the EP3 one that everyone says you need. It does look nicer if you get the K-Tune one, the billet aluminum, but that is just a cheap CSX idler pulley. And the belt that I'm using for no AC and no power steering is this right here, Continental 6PK 1325. That's the belt you'll need. It's a 6 rib. It doesn't really fully sit on the pulleys properly, but I've checked the forums. They said the 6 rib is better than the 7. I mean, you guys can try the 7 rib. That would be the length that you'd need, the 1325 millimeters, but you just get the 7 rib one. And for spark plugs, I am running the BKR9s from NGK, the iridiums, and these are the ones that you want to run if you're boosted. Mine are currently gapped to 0.20, and they've been pretty good, honestly. I have no complaints with them. I know some people go with the BK8s, but the BK9s work fine for me. For transmission, I'm using a 2003 RSX base model transmission. It is a 5-speed. I'm using a RSX stock flywheel with the RSX OEM clutch kit. Obviously, I know the OEM clutch kit isn't going to be able to hold as much power as it should since we're boosted. And right now we're just using it to brake and everything, get it all situated, make sure it runs fine. Don't want to throw in like a stage 3 clutch right off the bat for this, which I probably should have, but on a budget. So right now it's holding up. We're on about 5 psi and it's braking in just fine. I'm also using an RSX base slave for the slave cylinder with the stock R18 slave lines. I'm using RSX base half shaft. To get the half shaft to fit, just slide it in, bolt it onto the block, and then I use my stock R18 passenger axle to slide onto the K20 half shaft. And then on the driver side, I'm using a K20 base driver side axle. And if we just go into the car, I'll show you what kind of shifter I have. It's the RSX base 5-speed shifter box with Amazon shifter cables that run straight through the ground, like in the stock location on the 8th gen. And they're just zip tied on the back and they come up onto the shift selector right there. And now for some miscellaneous parts. Cooling, let's start with cooling. I used my R18 stock lower rad hose and I flipped it around and I got it to fit on the upper of the radiator going to there on the block or on the head. And then that hose was free because it came on the R18. Obviously, you'll already have that hose. And for the lower, right here, going to the thermostat and the bottom of the radiator, I am using a CSX base lower rad hose. And I use that hose because I know it's the same as the K24 and the K20 and the SI, and for some reason everyone tacks on the SI and it's the same part. So if you want to save a little money, go get yourself a CSX base lower rad hose and it'll work just fine. Now we'll talk a little bit about the wiring. I am using a custom wiring plug and play conversion harness that I made in-house. It just repins from your stock C101 plug into the plug that goes into your engine harness on the K24 here. It's just all repinned with plug going off of it for your O2 sensor. I'm not running my secondary one, so it's not Y for a secondary one, as I'm running AEM wideband. Another thing that I had to do was I had to repin the crank sensor because the K20 and the K24 run different crank sensor plugs. I also had to extend the starter wire because on the R18 the starter's right around the back, and on the K24 it's actually on the front, so I just had to cut, wire in a new plug and extend it up to the stock location there. What else? Injectors. I'm running the 410cc injectors. I had to repin those or cut and solder in the new pigtails for those. Knock sensor. I had to repin the knock sensor as well. And I believe that is it. I'm running the stock OEM map sensor as well. I am not running a MAF sensor. However, to get this car to run properly and to change cam angles, you actually need to cut the MAF sensor and splice in to the IAT wires. And what I did was I just got a nut and I welded the nut to my pipe going into my throttle body, and I cut and I soldered in the IAT sensor, and I just JB welded the sensor to the nut on the backside, so it looks a little bit clean. You can't really see it, but still got to tuck my wires and stuff like that, just making sure everything works properly before I do all of that. If you do not have your IAT sensor working, it will not switch between your maps, like your 0 degree, 10 degree, 20 degree maps. It will not switch between them, and you will start getting a little bit of knocking on the map. So I am running a 06 to 11 SI ECU. That's right under here. That's the ECU. It's for the 0611 SI, and it runs this motor just fine. To get the ECU to work and to start the car, you will need to tow the car down to Honda to get the key reflashed. One problem I did have was I did not have the VIN number for the ECU that I'm using, and they were kind of having a problem programming the key. So if you do buy an ECU for the SI and you're going to bring it to Honda to program the key, which you have to do to get it to run, to accept the key for the new engine, you will need the VIN number from the car that the ECU came out of. So if you buy ECU, make sure you know the VIN number that the ECU is coming out of. I'm also running K-Tuner V1.2. I do not really recommend it. I'm more of a Honda guy. It is easier, and the K-Tuner does not actually support boost, so that makes it a little bit difficult to tune, as I'm not a real tuner, so it's a little bit more difficult to maneuver in the app there. But it does work. You can use K-Tuner to tune a boosted K24. Another problem I am having, or did have, was since I'm using a 03 RSX transmission, my speedometer doesn't actually work. So when I turn the car on, the speedometer constantly reads 0. And to get VTEC to engage, it needs to be able to read speed. So what I did was I just bought a speedometer interface box, and I wired the speed sensor to the box to the ECU so that it'll be able to read speed and VTEC will work. If you're using a newer transmission, like a CSX transmission or whatever, you won't have to worry about that because the speed sensor will be the same to the ECU, to the dash, so everything will work just fine. So that's basically what you'll need to swap your R18 to K-Series. And I made a list here for you guys, so if you guys want the list, just DM me and I can email you a copy of the list. And I also did forget to say I am running a SI engine harness instead of the 04 TSX engine harness because it's plug and play into the SI ECU. But if you guys want this list, DM me and I'll send you guys an email of this list.